So Seb and I are talking today about the SCheck app, which is a project at NCCRED that has been around for a couple of years. And I'm going to give just a little bit of background for Seb to then introduce the next iteration of the project. So um, essentially, the SCheck app was built around a model of care and an original study that we ran both at St. Vincent's and at NCCRED. So the SCheck model of care is a stimulant-specific brief intervention and aims to enhance engagement and foster harm reduction. So really, this is not around treatment. This is kind of, now that I'm thinking about the program, maybe we should have been the first talk ahead of the CBT. So this is kind of pre-CBT. So this is when people are a bit curious or maybe a bit concerned or questioning. Maybe they haven't identified their use as problematic. This is that earlier sort of phase. And that's on the background, of course, not here in this slide, but there are plenty of references out there about delayed intervention seeking amongst people who have methamphetamine use disorder, and it can be a 10-year gap. So we're really trying to close some of that gap in terms of starting to explore your use and any problematic consequences of the use or how to mitigate for harms. So that was built on data from Smout et al., and that included a 4-session model. It's biopsychosocial assessment and feedback, physical health assessment and feedback, goal setting and care planning. So then that rolled into this idea about a smartphone application to provide that kind of support and information and link outs all through a smartphone application. So we ran a randomized controlled trial. It was a 28-day waitlist control, and it enrolled people who use methamphetamine at least once in the last month. And the primary outcomes were really to look at actual help seeking, intention to seek help, and readiness to change. So participants in the immediate access group, so the ones who were given access to the app as soon as they signed on to the study, not told that they had to wait 28 days and then have access to the app. Those folks who got the app earlier were more likely to seek professional help 28 days after accessing the app. And whilst there was no significant difference in the odds of intention to seek help or readiness to change, secondary analysis did demonstrate significant difference in the odds of professional help seeking for participants not seeking help at baseline. And for every minute in the app, we saw an increased likelihood of seeking help at day 28 by 8%. There were also some early signs of statistically significant reduction in methamphetamine use relative to time spent in the app as well. So taking all that into account, we've now, and that's published, so any further information that you'd like about that is on that QR code. And so taking into that, we've moved into the next phase of the SCheck app, so the SCheck app 2.0, which I think I then hand over to Seb.
Yeah, great. So I'll talk briefly about kind of how the app works and then some of the principles we applied in developing, in transitioning from version 1 to version 2. Okay, my slides are not there. So there are kind of three main feature sets of the app. The first is a series of self-assessments that users can do. So there's 7 self-assessments that go across various different areas of health that can be affected by methamphetamine use. Each of those self-assessments have between 1 and 4 measures that make up that self-assessment that are questionnaires, either familiar ones like the K10 or the PHQ-9, or ones that have been derived from the SCheck model of care that Krista just mentioned. The second kind of core feature of the app is tracking. So each day an app user can log their mood, their sleep, and their methamphetamine use, and the app will track that over time so they can review how much, how they're doing on those key health measures. And then the third key feature of the app is signposting. So we've thought really hard about what we point people who use the app to. Once they've done these self-assessments, they are given targeted information and accesses links to services and resources based on what they put into the app. And for some of those self-assessments, they are also given a pre-filled PDF to hand to a primary healthcare provider if they're at risk of a particular condition. So I want to talk about some of the kind of principles we applied in developing a new version of the app. So there were two priorities for redesign. One was really to simplify the visual language and functionality of the app. We really needed to simplify the visual design to ensure the app was intuitive to use. And we got some insight from the qualitative study that indicated maybe that we'd kind of gone a bit too far on that continuum from simplicity to innovation, towards innovation and away from simplicity. There's a principle I like to talk about in user experience design called Jacob's Law, which is if you have a digital product, the users of that product spend most of their time using other products. So if your product doesn't replicate patterns or processes that are familiar to them, they're likely to find it confusing or difficult to use. We also wanted to ensure that the content was clear and easy to read, which meant that high contrast between text and background colors was key. So changing the color palette we used. And there's a kind of standard process for measuring color contrast in digital products that we applied to this one, which, when you consider the impact that methamphetamine has on vision and cognition, seems particularly important to get right in this context. We also wanted to really focus on the quality of the signposting resources we pointed to. So we developed a checklist for those signposted resources and services. We applied 5 criteria. The first being it's designed for consumers and written in plain English. The second being it's up to date. The third being it's published by a credible Australian-based organization. It's applicable across states and territories, and content is web first and not PDF. There were a lot of PDF resources in the original version of the app, which was picked up by a qualitative study as being something that was difficult for people who are using mobile app to read. So what next? Krista, do you want to speak briefly about the new study?
Yeah. So in releasing this new version of the app, this better improved model of the app that takes into account the user feedback from the first round, participant feedback from qualitative studies, etc., we have now developed this app and it's almost ready to launch. It's sitting in between final ethical, it's got ethics approval, it's final governance approval, and then it will sit at the App Store for before product launch. It is being launched as a cohort study, and within the cohort study, what we aim to do is to describe the demographic and methamphetamine use profile of the people who use the app and be responsive to measure change in professional help seeking as well as days of methamphetamine use, which I alluded to in that RCT. I want to investigate associations between app use, demographic features, changes to help seeking and methamphetamine use and mental health outcomes. And basically it'll be launched in Australia for people who used methamphetamine at least once in the last month, who reside in Australia and are 18 years of age or older, and who are able to provide informed consent through the app download process.
And just a couple of reflections, I suppose, on a future direction. So with the ICBT product and this product, we've got kind of a neat binary of different audiences that probably doesn't really reflect where people are at. And I think one of the things we talk about a lot is what the relationship between those two products is going to be, whether there's more we can do to flow people from one to the other. And the second one is something we've been talking about as well, is whether there's any potential for integrating this product into services, or having it be something that people can share the data they get from the app with a clinician, because there's probably quite a lot of potential value in there, which we haven't built into this app because of kind of cost and risk implications, but definitely something we're thinking about for the future. And then yeah, so we're aiming to launch the app by the end of the year. Again, QR code is up there. That's where you'll hear about it first. So join our email list for news. And I think the slides are all here. So this is what it looks like.
Thank you both very much.